Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. So this is in The State and Revolution, under the section on the transition from capitalism to communism. In capitalist society, providing it develops under the most favorable conditions, we have a more or less complete democracy in the democratic republic. But this democracy is always hemmed in by the narrow limits set by capitalist exploitation, and consequently always remains in effect a democracy for the minority, only for the propertied classes, only for the rich. Freedom in capitalist society always remains about the same as it was in the ancient Greek republics: freedom for the slave owners. Owing to the conditions of capitalist exploitation, the modern wage slaves are so crushed by want and poverty that they cannot be bothered with democracy, cannot be bothered with politics in the ordinary, peaceful course of events. The majority of the population is debarred from participation in public and political life. He then goes on and lists like a bunch of ways that the rich keep the poor out, and concludes, but in their sum total, these restrictions exclude and squeeze out the poor from politics, from active participation in democracy. Skipping ahead here a little bit, Marx grasped this essence of capitalist democracy splendidly when, in analyzing the experience of the commune, he said that the oppressed are allowed once every few years to decide which particular representatives of the oppressing class shall represent and repress them in parliament. But aside from this capitalist democracy that is inevitably narrow and stealthily pushes aside the poor, and is therefore hypocritical and false through and through, forward development does not proceed simply, directly, and smoothly towards greater and greater democracy, as the liberal professors and petty bourgeois opportunists would have us believe. No. Forward development, i.e. development towards communism, proceeds through the dictatorship of the proletariat and cannot do otherwise, for the resistance of the capitalist exploiters cannot be broken by anyone else or in any other way. He goes on. And the dictatorship of the proletariat, i.e. the organization of the vanguard of the oppressed as the ruling class for the purpose of suppressing the oppressors, cannot result merely in an expansion of democracy, simultaneously with an immense expansion of democracy, which for the first time becomes democracy for the poor, democracy for the people, and not democracy for the moneybags. The dictatorship of the proletariat imposes a series of restrictions on the freedom of the oppressors, the exploiters, the capitalists. He goes on to say, we must oppress them in order to free humanity from wage slavery. Their resistance must be crushed by force. It is clear that there is no freedom and no democracy where there is suppression and where there is violence. And here's the key. Democracy for the vast majority of the people, and suppression by force, i.e. exclusion from democracy of the exploiters and oppressors of the people. This is the change democracy undergoes during the transition from capitalism to communism. Only in communist society, when the resistance of the capitalists has been completely crushed, when the capitalists have disappeared, when there are no classes, i.e. when there is no distinction between the members of society as regards their relation to the social means of production, only then the state ceases to exist and it becomes possible to speak of freedom. Only then will a truly complete democracy become possible and be realized, a democracy without any exceptions whatever. And only then will democracy begin to wither away, owing to the simple fact that, freed from capitalist slavery, from the untold horrors, savagery, absurdities, and infamies of capitalist exploitation, people will gradually become accustomed to observing the elementary rules of social intercourse that have been known for centuries and repeated for thousands of years in all copybook maxims. They will become accustomed to observing them without force, without coercion, without subordination, without the special apparatus for coercion called the state. And so in capitalist society, we have a democracy that is curtailed, wretched, false, a democracy only for the rich, for the minority. The dictatorship of the proletariat, the period of transition to communism, will for the first time create democracy for the people, for the majority, along with the necessary suppression of the exploiters of the minority. Communism alone is capable of providing really complete democracy, and the more complete it is, the sooner it will become unnecessary and wither away of its own accord. Resistant by dudes.